Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Bryan podcast. On today's show, got two special guests. Kevin Storie, the CEO of CAASA, the Commercial Aviation Association of South Africa. It's a non-profit organization formed to promote and protect the commercial interest of the general aviation industry in South Africa. And then a friend of mine, Goitse Diale, the new chairman of Aeroclub South Africa. Aeroclub of South Africa is one of the four main organizations who've joined forces in this quest to have the tenets of the revoked ARC 18.19 included in the new SACAR and SACAT 43.205. Now, that sounds rather complicated. However, we are dealing with something here, and this is an emergency meeting that we actually have having today because scrolling through LinkedIn last night, and I actually read Johan Lottering's. He put a post on there, and I thought, but hang on, I was under the impression that this had been sorted out to a point, and I was grossly misinformed. It hasn't. And I realized, well, if I think that, then there's probably quite a few other people in the aviation industry in South Africa that do think that. So, Kev, I'm going to give the floor to you. What are we talking about today? Where does this come from? And what are you guys doing?
Okay, so it goes back quite a while. ARC 1819, as we refer to it, was a document that was developed almost 19 years ago with engineers from the industry, with experts from the industry, and strangely enough, Johan Lottering, whom you referred to, was the gentleman working for the Civil Aviation Authority at the time that penned that document. So that aviation information circular was what we use to look after aircraft that are old in years, yet young in hours. And what has been happening is that a lot of our fleet, due to the way they get looked after, etc., have been following explicitly the ARC 1819 contents. And that has provided us with safe aviation for aircraft with these older engines, the 12-year calendar to be overhauled requirement. So as far as that goes, I think South Africa's got a remarkable record with it. And what has happened with the regulator, you can't regulate by an aviation information circular. You need to move that into regulation. And the regulator has taken some time to try and move it into Part 43. And on doing so, there were some errors which were raised with them, and they then put together with the industry a task team to deal with that after they removed or withdrew ARC 1819. And also on the withdrawal, CAASA at that stage prepared for interdict to get them to replace it in the interim. And it was dealt with in a difficult way by the regulator by issuing an initial exemption, and then 180 days on, at our request again, another exemption. The problem that was there is the regulator has mutated that to say that was for industry to comply, suited. It was for the task team to be able to develop the appropriate regulation in Part 43. Since then, the Part 43 work group had not completed its work, and especially had not developed the elements of ARC 1890 to cater for the extensive fleet of older aircraft. And then there was guidance that there was going to be a work group on it, and the can was just kicked down the road effectively. Eventually, the CAA decided they would put in a general notice as a waiver to cover industry in the interim. And that waiver does not really pass the muster test, as you can see from a repudiation on a crash, which didn't involve the engine, but the 12-year calendar year. It was a pilot error, but the insurance repudiated on it, stating that the waiver wasn't really a waiver. CAASA in that time has sent 3 legal letters, 2 badly answered and 1 not even responded to at all, to clarify the waiver to cover industry in the interim. And what has since transpired, and in the very latest last weeks or so, they have now decided to publish the CAATs, and they are even wrong from what was agreed in CAACOM, at CAACOM. So that is where the regulations are developed, the Civil Aviation Regulation Committee that recommends to the minister. It was stated by myself that there was problems. The intent of ARC 1819 was noted in that, and the chair of the CAACOM committee decided, and you can read the minutes, to basically push it through, say that we can't reignite that in this meeting. And I've warned that there would be a problem. Anyway, here we are. The Civil Aviation Authority decided to start sending letters to the AMOs, so the aviation maintenance organizations, stating that they were not going to issue C of A's, and then strangely enough, started extending that to authorities to fly, which are actually supposed to be governed by Part 44. And on queries, etc., have just created absolute havoc in the industry. The numbers that we're looking at, we estimated around about 1,400 aircraft would be affected. We made applications for the CAA to tell us exactly what it was, and only late at the meeting with the minister on Thursday were they able to give us some figures which are far greater than what we even estimated. So the industry is in a quite a mess. It goes further in that if your aircraft can't get a C of A, it can't be sold. It can't get an export C of A, which means the value of the aircraft is almost zero, which means all the banks that are covering these aircrafts, the asset is now worth not very much. And the regulator just has been pretty tardy on dealing with this, hasn't taken any guidance from the industry, and basically is trying to make out that it's industry's fault. And they say the door is open, but after 2.5 years of putting points across for them not to be accepted, just noted as such, it's not really consultation. It's not really listening to the industry. And at the present moment, the regulator seems to be smitten with ICAO. All they seem to want to do is what ICAO says. And ICAO allows for the filing of differences. We must do what is correct for South Africa, what is correct for our fleet of aircraft. And we can file differences. And we have an excellent engineering background. We built the likes of the Roy Falk, etc. Our engineering capabilities are fantastic. Our safety record is fantastic. And this goes in the face that when CAA did all these changes, etc., while under the idea that it was consulting, there was no safety case. There was no management of change, which they force upon us. And there was definitely no empirical evidence provided, or even an economic impact assessment, which is what the Americans do at FAA before they change any regulation. So it's a cart way before the horse. Actually, I think they've eaten the horse. So that's where we are currently. Thank you.
Yeah, you paint a scary picture. And I think one of the reasons why I really want to call today is because this is a real dangerous precedent that could be set where, all right, this isn't impacting, let's say, Ryan and I directly. It's a different part of the industry. However, tomorrow, something like this could pop up that affects us directly. So this is important. This is important that this is handled in a very efficient manner, because the precedent that could be set is dangerous. Kev, just before I get to you, Goitse, just going back to Kevin there, what aircraft is this affecting at this stage?
So initially, we believed it was only going to affect commercially used aircraft, basically Part 135. We were not under the impression it was going to affect the Part 91 aircraft, which even Lycoming makes provision that you don't do it on condition, you maintain on condition. It's even written in their documents. And basically the CAA, through the director, has decided it's applicable to everybody, recreational or not. And the focus engines are the Lycoming engines and the Continental Teledyne. However, we've seen ATFs refused for Rotax. We've seen Rolls-Royce engines also. So where does it stop? And there's no stability or conformity. It's depending who sends what, where. You get different answers from the inspectors. It's just particularly poor.
And just to be clear, this is something that sort of the CAA have jumped on the back of what ICAO say. This is not what Lycoming, as an example, are saying. Is that correct?
And that is correct. Well, you must remember from Lycoming or Textron or Continental, any of that. Obviously, there's court cases, etc., that happened many years ago in the industry in America. And that was basically for static engines and there were accidents, etc. However, when we speak with the Lycoming officials that were here in South Africa, not even, they were here last week. And we asked them, has the regulator contacted them? Has the regulator discussed it with them? And they have categorically stated to us, no. So I don't even know who the regulator is basing the information on what Lycoming says. Of course, the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, will not go and say that commercially you can just operate these things willy-nilly. However, with modern maintenance regimes, etc., and specialized programs, there are instances where commercially these aircraft can be operated over the calendar years, but it depends on the program. It depends on what you put in place. And AIC 1890 had excellent methodologies in it to ensure that it was safely looked after and had been flown safely all these years. So I would say South Africa was leading the world in how to look after these, especially in a very different environment. Take our coastal conditions to our inland dusty conditions. So South Africa has been a leader, and with a little bit more refinement, if this was included, as was our request, into the regulations with programs, etc., there's no reason why we would be at this this departure point where the regulator is just without basis embarked upon this route. And it's sad, to be blunt. Thank you.
Ryan, any questions there for Kev before I head over to Goitse?
Yeah, from my side, I would just imagine that one of the biggest sectors of industry that are affected would probably be the flying schools. Not so. I mean, they, especially the larger flight schools that operate more of these gauge aircraft. I mean, what impact does it have on them? And my concern is, how will they come through this? Because ultimately that will affect the production of pilots being able to service the industry and the overall work that's being done by industry to mitigate the shortage of pilots. If we can't train them because there's no aircraft, I see that as one of the big consequences of this.
No, absolutely. So let's just go simply there. Let's say you're doing twin flying. Twins are used very seldomly because of the expense to operate. And these are generally low-hour aircraft, but old. Most of these aircraft have been around since, the 60s, the 70s, etc. They're very simplistic engines, so they've got excellent reliability. So yes, it's absolutely affecting the flying schools, but it goes further. It affects the AMOs. I'll give you a case. There's one AMO that has 40 of these aircraft on books. 32 are affected. The owners of these aircraft say, well, while we don't know what's going on, we're not going to carry on with MPIs, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no revenue coming in. So retrenchments are already happening. They're closing the doors. And once you've closed an AMO, you're not really going to open it again. Then you take the firefighting aircraft that are used very seldom, only when there is a fire, etc. So these are also low hours, older aircraft. So if you look across the board, and let's go one step further, let's take a doctor that uses his Baron or something like that to go and do vital surgery in the likes of Richards Bay or something like that. He is not able to get down to that place anymore because technically he has to self-ground his aircraft, remove his release to service. And all those people are affected that can't have the operations, etc., that they would. So it goes to every little bit of the South African economic sector. And I would hazard to say it might even affect some of the politicians that utilize these aircraft that have been flying quite comfortably back and forth to the parliament down in Cape Town, etc. So it's right across. And it also all the sales of the aircraft, etc. you're going to see a huge exodus through to Namibia. So you're absolutely correct. The training environment is going to be affected. And this is in light of all the BE stuff and all the other challenges that are on top of us at the moment, where the codes are not correct for aviation environment. It's just one disaster after the other. And it just seems there's no real plan. And the minister needs to take serious notice of what is happening and the lack of change control that is in place at the regulator. Thank you.
What's really sad, you're saying, you've been sitting there at CAACOM and you've gone through the right channels. This is not you guys trying to circumvent going through the correct channel. You've done everything that you should have done, and we still find ourselves in the situation that was all fruitless, and now it's a case of taking it not taking it in another direction, but obviously getting people like Goitse. I'll let you introduce yourself now. What are you guys doing to help Goitse at Aeroclub? And congrats on that appointment of chairman there at Aeroclub. I think you're the perfect guy for that, by the way. When I first met you at the at Sandton last year during the Aviation Summit, I thought this youngster's going places, because you were constantly networking. You were speaking, making a lot of sense when you were talking to everyone. So I'm really glad to see you in this position. So yeah, Goitse, tell us, what are you guys doing?
Thanks. The Aeroclub, we're in a very interesting position, particularly because we represent recreational aviation and general aviation. The Aeroclub is the custodian of 13 other sections. Currently on book, we have about 2,180 members in the Aeroclub, which represents a large portion of general aviation and recreational aviation. Ourselves and CAASA have a very good relationship. In fact, CAASA is an honorary member of the Aeroclub. In every conversation and in every regulatory development platform, there's always conversations back and forth with CAASA, including proposals, including voting, and so on. At the core of what we do is the representation of the normal pilot or the flying club or the smaller flying groups across the country. And our role is to protect and to preserve free flight. We've been doing that for 104 years, and it won't stop today because of regulatory overreach. At the end of the day, it is in our best interest to protect our members and to make sure that every single owner is represented in a platform such as ministerial meetings and CAACOM and so forth. The 12-year rule particularly affects a lot of our recreational aviation part. And I want to use an example. If all four of us decided to buy an RV7 or an RV6 back in the day that uses a Lycoming or a Continental engine, albeit in a non-type certified aircraft, we are affected. We don't use that aircraft for paying passengers, nor do we use it for training. We use it merely for leisure. Now, if you look at that case and you look at the number of people now based on that context who are affected, it really boils down to the freedom of flying for free for general leisure. Now, in South Africa, we are the home of general aviation on the continent. We have the largest number of general aviation aircraft on the register on the African continent. We have some of the best safety records in terms of flying, and we have to look across the board. We have some of the best AMOs. We have few engine shops, but some of the best engine shops in Southern Africa. Now, it is, in my opinion, that the Aeroclub, including CAASA and including any other general aviation activist protecting the interest of the industry on this 12-year rule, that we are acting upon what we know as fact and what we know as quality that the industry can provide. When you operate in a training environment, you train your students with the surety that they don't want to kill themselves, nor will they kill other people. And that is the same in general aviation. When somebody buys an airplane, they don't buy an airplane to go and crash. They want to comply. There is a willingness to comply. And you see that year on year when people who are in off the beaten track locations still go back to the AMOs to get those mandatory checks, to get those scheduled checks going on. And that's our role. Our role is to say to anyone out there, that includes the Civil Aviation Authority, as well as ICAO, to say there's a willingness to comply, and we will comply. But what we do not appreciate is regulatory overreach with baseless statements or baseless founding.
Yeah, you make 100%, 100% sense in what you're saying. And this this general consensus is across the board. I've had a couple of conversations with aviation leaders over the past couple of months, and a lot of the time this term gets brought up, overreaching in the regulation. Everyone is more than willing to comply, but we just need to be careful on going overboard. I just want to ask, how is it working around the world now? So ICAO come out with whatever you want to call it, a best practice for this 12-year engine rule. What are they doing in America as an example? Does something like this apply? Are they a bit more lenient? Why have we decided to go, just follow ICAO blindly down the road and say, that's what they say, so we're going to do it? Are there other countries that are more lenient, or?
I want to before I give Kevin an opportunity, I want to give context. So if we look at the biggest general aviation market around the world, we're looking at obviously the United States of America under the FAA, we're looking at Australia, and we're looking at New Zealand, and we look at the United Kingdom, or now the UK CAA. All of those countries have gone through the process we are currently going through and have won. And won in the sense where the civil aviation authorities, in simple terms, have come to their senses to realize that unconditioned maintenance with an appropriate and authorized maintenance program or structure is acceptable. Now, OEMs, like any other company, you don't produce a product and say it's going to last forever, particularly because of liability. Somewhere, somehow things happen and there are external factors. In our context, what we have is our regulator trying to buy points internationally to be the custodians of safety. However, we are not a country and a jurisdiction that has a bad safety record in aviation. So for us, it's a mismatch of context.
Yeah.
When we look at best practices across the world, best practice happens when the regulator, including industry, find amicable ways to solve the solutions or the problems that are within the market. For example, if we have 38% of aircraft accidents in this country due to engine power plant problems, that does not mean just because the engine is old, it's going to have problems. There are other superseding issues such as maintenance, such as non-PMA parts. Other issues obviously go on to training. So it's a very complex matter that we're looking at. When we look at what ICAO best practices are for recreational aviation, we fall outside of the ICAO activity. What we do comply with is licensing and continuous airworthiness maintenance programs. So there is a willingness to comply. In fact, if you remember quite clearly, a couple of years ago, the South African Civil Aviation Authority disbanded the approved person panel. And what an approved person is, just like in America, is you and I could do a couple of exams as a private owner, as a private individual, to work on non-type certified aircraft. We had multiple people come up and say, we will do that under the auspices of a Civil Aviation Authority because of the willingness to comply. So in terms of best practice, we are on par and probably supersede. Where we are, though, in the context of South Africa, we're in a very difficult place where we need collaboration in the development of regulation, in the development of processes, and in the development of programs that affect flying commercially or private.
Yeah. So where to now? Kev, you guys have taken this on. Where are you in the process?
Okay, so to start with, I think after 2.5 years of discussing this, of lawyers' letters, etc., because in a lawyer's letter, it's succinctly put, it should be easy for the regulator to understand what's going on. I think the regulator doesn't really understand their position as a regulator. You're supposed to co-design things. So we have always been as, let's get these task teams together, hear what we are saying, use our experts. I would put it that the engineering expertise that we have in South Africa far supersedes the expertise, experience, and qualifications within the regulator. And if the regulator was honest with themselves and says, right, we don't have that expertise, and yes, we are growing various people into those positions, which is absolutely correct, no problem with that at all, you would bring that brain trust into your decision making, and you would utilize them in a co-development situation. what the regulator does at the moment is they come up with something that they think is going to work internally without the correct checks and balances. Then they bring it to us, and then we've got to try and rework it after the fact. And often you're on a trajectory that you can never fix it that way. And ARC 1819 Part 43 is a case in point. So I think the regulator has to go and look in the mirror quite hard and realize what their actual function is and how they should be embracing and working with true partnership, not just tokenism. The regulator at the present moment talks about partnership. They've got lots of talk, but you don't see the action. You don't see the response. And they think consultation is merely a tick box exercise. And that's what it should not be. And some of the best operating areas around the world and other regulators have got these task teams where they listen to the industry, and they embrace the qualifications in the industry, and they do what's right for their countries. And in South Africa, we have got an older fleet that services us very, very well. And we need to do what is right for South Africa, for our fleet, for our pilots, for our operators. And that is what needs to happen, rather than saying, right, we want to be seen as the best ICAO representative, and we're going to blindly do what ICAO does. And the question also happens is that when you file a difference, if there's a difference needed, you need to have the expertise inside DOT to file that difference. And that begs the question, is there that expertise inside the DOT as well? You've seen the debacles with the Air Service Licensing Council. That continues to this day. We've got a new council, and they're asking the same poor questions that they did in the past to issue licenses and that sort of thing. So I think there needs to be a ground up re-understanding of what the regulator should be doing, where they should be in control, or where they should be regulating, not dictating. And it needs to be balanced with economic viability. It can't just be safety at the expense of the economy. It has to be balanced. And at the present moment, the seesaw is completely down to safety at all expense. And that will end up with no aviation industry. And it goes further. The inspectors won't have jobs to do, just won't be there. So you will end up with a lovely load of executives sitting at the top of CAA with no work to do, and an absolutely illegal flying populace, which is on the cards. It's coming. You can go to any airfield and ask them, are you going to comply with this? And they're saying, we would like to comply, but it's becoming too onerous. The rules are bureaucratic. It's just red tape. And we most probably going to go down the route of flying illegally. And where does that leave us? For the airlines, you should be worried, because how are the operators going to come into an unregulated area that is unsafe with the airlines? That's why the airlines should be backing us. That's why the airlines should be putting pressure on the regulator to do the right thing based on empirical evidence, based on safety facts, based on measured understanding, and based on proper co-design of what needs to happen, not just tick boxes with a pre-decided outcome that they come to these meetings with on most cases. And that's not every department, but it's quite a few of the departments that have missed the boat completely. Thank you.
I want to add something there onto what Kev said. I think all of us understand that safety culture starts with collaboration. Safety culture starts with collaboration. And what that means is that it needs the buy-in of every individual within that particular context or environment to come in and have that discussion and collaboration. We must also understand that because we're in a unique place on the African continent, and our industry, albeit far advanced in other African countries, and perhaps on par with the rest of the world, we have our own unique challenges, such as the economy. We have our own unique challenges, such as the number of training facilities or the cost of training and so forth. What we need to understand that it is a cycle. Remember, today it's general aviation and recreational aviation that is a victim of a regulatory overreach. Tomorrow is 121 operation. And then the next day it's Part 61 licensing. Then the next day it's medicals. And then the next day is air traffic service. So what we need to warn against is to say, we are trying to promote a positive and good safety culture that involves collaboration. We must also thank everybody who has come onto the board to try and help. And those are OEMs, those are, people like you who want our voices heard, because what is very important is that we're in an industry where collaboration is taken very seriously. And that is why CAASA, the Aero Club, and other members of industry have decided to take up seats on CAACA, to say we are there to make contributions to proposals, and we are there to make contributions to the regulatory development of this country. What we must also recognize is that perhaps in the future I might be in the CAA, right? But the reason why is because of the experience that I have within context. You cannot rule over a farm without any experience in farming. And I think that's where we need to put it, to say that it's about collaboration.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, sorry, just to interject here as well. I mean, no one can dispute that overall safety is everyone's paramount concern, and nobody wants to jeopardize that. But there has to be a balance. And just touching on most owners, private owners as well, the ones that I know that own their private aircraft are fanatical about their machines, and they do go over the top, just looking after their aircraft and their engines anyway. So, yeah, I certainly hope that you guys can find some sort of compromise with the regulator, because we certainly do have the expertise and the qualifications within the industry to reach that.
If I may, I could just tell you what the steps are at the present moment. So we met with the minister last Thursday. She gave us sort of an olive branch. She said, could we put forward a letter indicating what the issues were, etc., succinctly for her, which we did. And the regulator then will be required to respond by the end of business on Tuesday. We are trusting that there will be a reprieve of some sort that will then possibly curb the intention of the industry to interdict the regulator. We have raised a substantial amount of money. I'm not going to advise the exact quantum of it, but it is a substantial amount of money to enable a legal challenge to the regulator on the providers that we've spoken about in this very podcast. So I think the olive branch is both ways. We have done that with the minister. I think Minister Creasy is quite an astute woman. I think she looks at things in an objective manner, and I believe she will see some of the flaws and some of the injustices and possibly some of the misinformation she has been fed or showcased. And I trust that she will make the right decision for something to give us relief in the interim, while we go back to the debating and the discussion boards and put in what was supposed to have been put in the last 2 years into Part 43 that looks after our industry. And if that happens, I think that's a win-win. If it doesn't happen, I think the trust of the regulator has been seriously eroded here. They're going to have to do a lot to regain industry's trust, because after what has been said and what has been done and what they promised and what they've reneged upon, that is a very damning statement that the regulator is not working with proper bona fides. And that is the challenge. And that's what needs to be addressed. And it needs proper leadership from the CAA to ensure that that trust is re-implemented. Industry is trustworthy. We've proven it time and time again. We come to the party, but they need to really step up and understand that they're there to serve the industry and regulate it, not dictate to it. Thank you.
Goitse, you mentioned collaboration there, a very important message. And I think what I'm getting from this is the days of just sitting on the outskirts and saying, okay, these guys are going to handle it, I'm going to sit here and watch this play out. Particularly when it comes to something like the regulator, people don't want to get their hands dirty there. They want to sit back and, you're right. Those days it's done. You have to get involved. How do you get involved? Can the airlines get involved? Do private sort of ATP holders, do they get involved? How does it work? Where would you go? What can they do to support?
Thanks for that. I think that's very important. Representation in this day and age, especially association to a particular club, a particular association or environment, is super important. As the Aeroclub of South Africa, we welcome anyone and everybody, enthusiasts, aircraft owners, whether you're in hang gliding, paragliding, in powered flying, non-type certified flying. You can become a member of the Aeroclub, and you can visit the Aeroclub's website as well. But we have formed a task team with many other various associations such as CAASA, who I've said are honorary members of the Aero Club, and you can become a member of CAASA or the other associated associations of CAASA, such as ANSA and so forth. At the end of the day, I think where it starts at grassroots level, where we're saying to the flying clubs, and we're appealing as well to the pilots and those who are affected and those in the periphery who may be affected. You know, like you were saying, you can be an ATPL license holder, but after retirement, you might be looking to get yourself an RV6. So, you know, at the end of the day, this is who we're protecting. We're protecting the interest of now and the interest of tomorrow. And getting involved means being a part of an association, being a part of a flying club or an aero club. And also part of our task team, we have put out a call to action and a call to donate. The information about the task team can be found on the CAASA website and the Aero Club website regarding how you can donate. And every little contribution really does help us. Even technical expertise, where there are new perspectives that we can explore, especially with engineers who have some sort of history or connection to the topic at hand.
You know, it hits hard. My one of my first flights that sticks in my mind, flying along the coast there in Durban with my old man, a Cherokee 140 or something like that. I mean, I do not like the thought that I won't be able to put my daughter next to me in a light aircraft and go fly along the coast, because almost feels like that's a right you should have to do, particularly if you're holding a license that you've worked hard to get and worked hard to keep current. And what you guys are saying is, if we don't get this right, that might not be possible. I can't think of two better guys on this. Kevin, I must commend you. Your ability to paint a story and your public speaking attributes are absolutely superb. I saw you on a business news podcast first, and I thought how clear it was explained in such a beautiful, succinct way. And Goitse as well, from your side, spot on, pal. You're going a long way in the industry, and I would back you every day of the week. Guys, thank you for joining us. We're going to do our best to push this out as far and as wide as possible. And you guys have an open invitation on the Bryan and Ryan podcast. If you feel that there's something new, some new input that you want to get out, you shoot Ryan or myself a message, and we'll be on the airwaves in the afternoon. So thank you for joining us, guys.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, gents, from my
Appreciate
side,
it. Thanks for what you do for aviation. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.
Have a good day first.